You need to understand avoidants are deeply affected by communication that feels calm, clear, and emotionally safe, because most of their life has taught them to expect the opposite. They expect conversations to turn into pressure. They expect feelings to become demands. They expect honesty to arrive with intensity so sharp that it makes them want to pull back before they are fully seen. So when they meet someone whose words feel steady instead of chaotic, whose honesty feels grounded instead of forceful, whose presence feels safe instead of overwhelming, it reaches them in a place they do not usually let people touch. And that is why they can become so deeply attached to a person who communicates this way, not because they are playing a game, not because they love being chased, but because this kind of communication makes closeness feel possible without making them feel trapped. For an avoidant, communication is never just communication, it is an emotional atmosphere. It is a feeling in the chest. It is the difference between "I can stay here" and "I need to leave before this gets too intense." That is what people often miss. They think avoidants are simply uninterested, emotionally unavailable, or cold. But so often, what looks like disinterest is actually overwhelm. What looks like detachment is self-protection. What looks like silence is a nervous system trying to keep itself from drowning. Somewhere in their story, they learned that closeness can become heavy very quickly, that feelings can come with expectations they do not know how to meet, that being needed can feel like being cornered. So they adapted. They learned to shut down, to delay replies, to go vague, to stay a little emotionally removed, because distance gave them something they trusted: control. And then, every now and then, they meet someone different. Not someone perfect, not someone emotionless, but someone who knows how to speak from the heart without throwing that heart at another person like a weapon. Someone who can say, "I care about you," without making it sound like, "Now you owe me." Someone who can say, "This hurt me," without turning the conversation into a storm. Someone who can be honest without making honesty feel dangerous. And to an avoidant, that can feel so rare, so unfamiliar, and so deeply relieving that they do not even know how much it matters until they start missing it. Because calm communication does something powerful. It lowers their defenses without forcing them open. It gives them room to stay present. It gives them space to actually hear what is being said, instead of spending the entire conversation trying to manage their own panic. Think about that for a moment. Most people listen best when they feel safe. Avoidants are no different. In fact, they may need that sense of safety even more, because their first instinct when emotions rise is often not to lean in, but to leave. So the person who communicates clearly, kindly, and calmly becomes unforgettable, because that person creates a rare emotional experience, one where truth and safety exist in the same room. And the reason this becomes so powerful is because avoidants are often much more sensitive than they appear. Beneath the distance, beneath the silence, beneath the need for space, there is often a person who feels a lot more than they know how to express. They notice tone. They notice shifts. They notice whether your words are meant to connect or control. They notice whether your honesty comes with dignity or desperation. And when your communication carries steadiness, when it carries emotional maturity, when it says, "I am here to tell the truth, not to trap you," it touches them in a way that dramatic words never will. That is why someone can become deeply important to an avoidant simply by the way they communicate. Not by performing, not by pretending not to care, not by becoming cold or mysterious, but by being emotionally safe, by saying things clearly, by not punishing silence with chaos, by not turning every vulnerable moment into a courtroom, by not making feelings feel like something that has to be escaped from. This is what people misunderstand when they think avoidants only want distance. No, they do not only want distance. They want relief. They want a kind of closeness that does not make their whole system feel like it is losing air. And when someone offers them that, they remember it. But let's be honest, this kind of communication is hard, especially when you care deeply. When you love someone who pulls away, everything in you wants to speak louder, to explain more, to make them understand your pain, to say it one more time in the hope that this time it will land. That is human. That is natural. But the tragedy is that the more panic enters your voice, the more an avoidant may stop hearing the message and start reacting only to the intensity. So the person who communicates in a calm, self-respecting way stands out, because they are not speaking from emotional chaos. They are speaking from grounded truth. And grounded truth is far more powerful than emotional urgency. It sounds like this. It sounds like, I care about you, but I need consistency. It sounds like, I want to understand you, but I will not abandon myself in the process. It sounds like, you matter to me, but so do I. Do you hear the difference? There is warmth in it, but there is also stability. There is love in it, but there is also self-respect. There is honesty, but there is no emotional violence. And to an avoidant, that kind of communication can feel like meeting someone whose heart is open, but whose soul is not chaotic. Someone who can love without collapsing. Someone who can feel deeply without turning every feeling into a demand. Someone who can stay soft without losing their center. And that is where attachment begins for them. Not always in grand romance, not always in dramatic moments, but in relief. In the relief of not feeling pushed. In the relief of not being misread as a monster every time they need space. In the relief of realizing that someone can tell the truth without shaming them. In the relief of feeling seen without feeling swallowed. Relief is powerful. Relief becomes memory. Memory becomes longing. And that is often why avoidants replay certain people in their minds long after the relationship shifts or ends. Because those people made closeness feel gentler than they expected. Still, there is an important truth you must hold on to. Just because your communication reaches them does not mean it will heal them. Just because they feel safe with you does not mean they suddenly know how to stay. Just because your words calm their defenses does not mean their old patterns will disappear. This is where many loving people get hurt. They believe that if they just keep communicating beautifully, patiently, perfectly, the avoidant will finally become consistent. But your communication can open a door. It cannot walk through it for them. It can create safety. It cannot create readiness. It can touch their heart, but it cannot do their healing. So if you are the kind of person who communicates calmly, clearly, and with emotional depth, do not lose that gift. It is rare, it is powerful, it is beautiful, but never turn it into a reason to overstay where you are not being met. Never use your emotional intelligence to excuse someone else's emotional unavailability forever. Let your communication be a reflection of your character, not a sacrifice of your needs. Because yes, avoidants may become deeply attached to people who speak with safety and truth, but the right person will not only be moved by the way you communicate, they will also learn how to meet you there. And that is the kind of connection your heart deserves. You need to understand what pulls an avoidant closer is not pressure, not intensity, not chasing, but emotional steadiness, self-respect, and truth without emotional chaos. That is the part so many people miss when they love someone who keeps pulling away. They think the answer is to say more, explain more, prove more, feel more loudly, so the other person finally understands how much they matter. They think if they can just find the perfect words, the perfect timing, the perfect emotional moment, the avoidant will suddenly stop running and turn around with clarity in their eyes. But avoidants are rarely moved by emotional force. Most of the time, force only confirms the fear already living inside them. The fear that closeness will become pressure, that feelings will become obligations, that love will become something they cannot breathe inside. So when an avoidant meets someone whose energy is steady, whose words are honest but not chaotic, whose presence feels grounded instead of demanding, something unusual begins to happen. They do not feel attacked. They do not feel cornered. They do not feel like they are about to be swallowed by someone else's emotions. They feel space. They feel room. They feel a kind of connection that does not immediately activate their instinct to escape. And that matters more than most people realize, because avoidants are not just reacting to what you say. They are reacting to how your communication feels inside their body. To them, the difference between pressure and peace is everything. Somewhere in their story, they learned that emotions were not always safe. Maybe every hard conversation in their past felt loaded. Maybe vulnerability came with criticism. Maybe being needed felt like being trapped. Maybe someone's sadness became their burden. Someone's love became control. Someone's closeness became suffocation. So now, even when they meet someone kind, even when they meet someone genuine, part of them is still scanning for danger. Part of them is listening for the hidden demand, the hidden expectation, the moment when affection turns into pressure. That is why emotional steadiness affects them so deeply, because steadiness tells their nervous system something it is not used to hearing. You are safe here. You are not being attacked. You are not being forced. You are being invited. And there is something almost heartbreaking about that because many avoidants do want connection. They just do not know how to trust the path to it. They want closeness, but not the kind that costs them their sense of control. They want to be understood, but not dissected. They want to be loved, but not consumed. So when someone communicates with self-respect and emotional steadiness, it feels different from the relationships that taught them to stay guarded. It feels clean. It feels quiet in the best way. It feels like being near someone who is not trying to win, not trying to dominate, not trying to make them feel guilty, but is simply standing in the truth with calmness. And calmness, to an avoidant, can be more intimate than passion because passion can feel dangerous, but calmness feels like somewhere they can rest. This is why chasing so often backfires. Chasing is full of urgency. Even when it comes from love, it carries fear. It carries the energy of please do not leave, please understand me, please choose me, please fix this now. And the avoidant feels that urgency not always as devotion, but as pressure. They feel the emotional pull on them, and instead of wanting to move closer, they often want to protect themselves by stepping back. Not because they do not care, but because your intensity makes their own emotions harder to manage. The more the conversation feels emotionally flooded, the less access they have to their heart, and the more they move into distance, silence, vagueness, or retreat. But emotional steadiness does the opposite. Emotional steadiness says, I care, but I am not here to control you. It says, this matters to me, but I will not collapse if you do not respond the way I hope. It says, I can tell the truth without turning my truth into a storm. That kind of energy is deeply attractive to avoidants because it does not make them feel responsible for regulating your entire emotional world. It allows them to stay present without feeling like they are already failing. It gives them a chance to lean in without feeling trapped the moment they do. And self-respect is part of what makes that communication so powerful. Because self-respect changes the tone of everything. It means you are not speaking from desperation. It means you are not over-explaining in the hope that they will validate you. It means you are not shrinking your truth just to keep them comfortable, and you are not exploding your truth just to force them to finally hear it. You are simply standing in who you are. You are saying what is real, and you are also honoring yourself in the process. That is rare, and avoidants notice it, even if they never say it out loud. They notice the difference between someone who is trying to cling and someone who is calmly rooted in their own worth. It sounds like this. It sounds like, I care about you, but I also need consistency. It sounds like, I want closeness, but not at the cost of my peace. It sounds like, I am open to connection, but I will not chase what is unwilling to meet me. Do you hear how different that feels? There is feeling in it, there is warmth in it, but there is also stability. There is no performance, there is no panic, there is no emotional collapse. And for an avoidant who may be used to either emotional shutdown or emotional chaos, this kind of truth can feel like a new language. A language where love does not come with loss of self and honesty does not come with emotional violence. That is why they can become so deeply drawn to people who communicate this way. Because emotional steadiness is not boring to them, it is relieving. Self-respect is not cold to them, it is trustworthy. Truth without chaos is not distant to them, it is approachable. It allows them to experience connection in a form that does not immediately trigger their defenses. It shows them that intimacy can exist without pressure, that care can exist without control, that someone can be emotionally available without becoming emotionally overwhelming. And when an avoidant experiences that, it leaves a mark. They may pull away, they may still struggle, they may still not know how to hold onto what feels good, but they remember the person who made closeness feel less frightening than usual. Still, this is where your heart needs wisdom, because just because an avoidant is pulled closer by your steadiness does not mean they are ready to stay there. Just because your self-respect makes them trust you does not mean they will suddenly become capable of giving you the consistency you deserve. This is where many people lose themselves. They think if I stay calm enough, patient enough, understanding enough, I can teach them how to love me. But emotional steadiness should not become self-sacrifice. Self-respect should not become silent suffering. And truth without emotional chaos should never mean truth without standards. So let your way of communicating remain beautiful. Let it remain calm. Let it remain honest. Let it remain deeply human. But let it also remain protective of your own heart. Because the goal is not just to be the kind of person an avoidant feels safe with. The goal is to be the kind of person who does not abandon themselves trying to create safety for someone else. Yes, avoidants are often drawn to emotional steadiness, self-respect, and truth without chaos, because those qualities feel like peace to a nervous system that has known too much pressure. But the right connection will not only be drawn to your peace, it will learn how to protect that peace too. And that is the kind of love that does not just touch your heart, it stays. You need to understand, avoidants become attached to people who know how to express feelings without making those feelings sound like a weapon, a demand, or a trap, and that changes more inside them than they will ever know how to say. So many people think avoidants are only moved by distance, mystery, or emotional unavailability, but that is not really the truth. What moves them most deeply is often something far more human, far more subtle, and far more emotional than people realize. It is the experience of being with someone who can tell the truth of their heart without turning that truth into pressure. It is being near someone who can say, "This matters to me," without making it sound like, "Now you must carry this for me." It is being loved in a way that feels honest but not overpowering. And for someone who has spent much of their life protecting themselves from emotional intensity, that kind of communication can feel almost impossible to forget. The reason it affects them so deeply is because many avoidants did not grow up learning that feelings could be shared safely. Somewhere in their story, emotions may have come with tension, disappointment, criticism, or guilt. Maybe when they were vulnerable, they were misunderstood. Maybe when they had needs, they were made to feel like those needs were inconvenient. Maybe when closeness appeared, it came with too much weight, too much pressure, too much expectation, too quickly. So they learned to protect themselves. Not always consciously, not always with cruelty, but with distance. They learn to hold things in. They learn to detach. They learn to keep one foot near the door. Because when emotions feel dangerous, self-protection starts to look like silence, and freedom starts to look like distance. That is why the way someone expresses feelings matters so much to them. Because to an avoidant, emotion is never just emotion. Emotion is risk. Emotion is the possibility of being swallowed, blamed, cornered, or exposed. So when a person comes into their life and expresses feelings in a way that does not feel like emotional force, it touches them in a place that has been guarded for a very long time. It feels different from what they expected. It feels like honesty without attack. It feels like vulnerability without emotional chaos. It feels like someone opening their heart without demanding that the avoidant instantly become someone else in order to hold it. There is something deeply healing, even if only for a moment, about hearing words like, "I care about you," said with gentleness instead of fear. There is something deeply affecting about hearing, "This hurt me," said with clarity instead of accusation. There is something unforgettable about being told the truth in a way that does not make them feel defective, wrong, or trapped. Because avoidants are often more sensitive than they appear. They may look detached, but they notice the energy behind words. They notice whether someone is trying to connect with them or control them. They notice whether a conversation is inviting closeness or forcing it. And when someone expresses feelings with calmness, dignity, and emotional intelligence, the avoidant does not just hear the words, they feel the safety inside those words. That safety matters more than people understand. Because when feelings are expressed like a weapon, the avoidant instinctively prepares for battle. When feelings are expressed like a demand, they feel pressure rising in their chest. When feelings are expressed like a trap, they begin looking for the nearest exit, even if part of them wishes they did not have to leave. But when feelings are expressed with openness and steadiness, something softer happens. Their guard does not vanish, but it lowers. Their body does not relax all at once, but it stops bracing quite so hard. They begin to feel that maybe closeness does not always have to cost them their peace. And that can become deeply addictive for them, not because they are manipulative, not because they are calculating, but because peace is addictive to a person who has spent so much of life associating intimacy with tension. Think about that. If someone has grown used to conversations feeling heavy, urgent, or emotionally loaded, then meeting a person who can speak from the heart without drowning them in it feels extraordinary. It feels rare. It feels like relief. And relief has a way of sinking deep into the memory. They may not know how to respond perfectly. They may not suddenly become consistent. They may still struggle with their habits of retreat, but they remember how that person made them feel. They remember the person whose emotions did not chase them into a corner. They remember the person whose honesty felt like an open hand instead of a fist. It often sounds simple on the surface. It sounds like, I like being with you, but I also need honesty. It sounds like, I'm not here to blame you, I just want to be real with you. It sounds like, I care, but I'm not going to force this. These kinds of words do not come from panic, and that is why they land differently. They are still emotional, still vulnerable, still real, but they are not loaded with the energy of, fix this now or I will fall apart. They carry self-respect. They carry groundedness. They carry the message that love can be honest without becoming chaotic. And for an avoidant, that kind of communication can feel like standing near warmth without getting burned. That is why they often become attached to people who communicate this way. Because that person gives them something they are starving for, even if they do not know how to admit it. They are starving for closeness that does not feel consuming. They are starving for truth that does not feel punishing. They are starving for emotional presence that does not come wrapped in control. They may still fear it. They may still mistrust it at first. They may even pull away from it, because sometimes people pull away from what they need most when it feels unfamiliar, but it stays with them. It stays with them because it offers a version of connection their heart has quietly wanted all along. And there is a painful beauty in that, because sometimes the avoidant meets someone whose way of expressing feelings is exactly what they have needed, yet they are still not healed enough to hold on to it. They are moved by it, but movement is not the same as readiness. They are touched by it, but being touched is not the same as being transformed. This is where many people get hurt because they think if my words reach them, then surely my love will change them. But your ability to express feelings beautifully cannot do another person's inner work for them. It can open a window, but it cannot make them stay in the room. It can show them what safe communication feels like, but it cannot force them to become capable of sustaining that safety. So if you are someone who speaks from the heart with calmness, with honesty, with emotional depth that does not become a weapon, do not lose that gift. It is rare, it is powerful, it is deeply human. But never let that gift become the reason you remain in a place where your heart is not being met. Never keep pouring out beautiful truth to someone who only takes comfort from it without learning how to return it. Because the right person will not only be moved by the way you express your feelings, they will also begin to honor those feelings with consistency, care, and emotional courage. That is the part you must hold close. Yes, avoidants often become deeply attached to people who know how to express feelings without turning them into pressure, because that kind of communication feels safe to a heart that has spent years hiding from emotional weight. Yes, they remember the person whose honesty felt soft, whose truth felt steady, whose care did not come with a cage around it. But your job is not to become unforgettable by loving beautifully while accepting crumbs. Your job is to remain rooted in the kind of love that tells the truth with tenderness, and also knows when tenderness must include yourself. You need to understand, the communication style avoidants remember most is the one that made them feel understood without being controlled and seen without being cornered, because that kind of connection reaches a part of them that has spent years hiding behind distance. So many people think avoidants only remember the ones who were hard to get, mysterious, unavailable, or emotionally cold, but that is not the deepest truth. What stays in an avoidant's heart is often not the person who played games best, but the person who made closeness feel less dangerous. The person who knew how to speak with honesty, warmth, and steadiness. The person who could look into their silence and not immediately punish it, but also not disappear inside it. The person who made them feel known without making them feel trapped by being known. That matters more than most people realize, because for an avoidant, being understood is not always easy to receive. On the outside, they may look composed, distant, calm, and independent, but inside, there is often a history of feeling that closeness comes with pressure. There is often a fear that if someone sees too much, they will ask for too much. If someone understands too much, they will expect too much. If someone gets too close, they will take away the only thing that has ever made them feel safe, their space, their control, their ability to retreat before they are overwhelmed. So they learn to manage people carefully. They reveal a little, then step back. They connect, then create distance. They let someone in, but never all the way, because somewhere deep inside, they believe that being fully seen could lead to being emotionally captured. And then, every now and then, they meet someone whose communication feels completely different. Someone who pays attention without interrogating. Someone who notices what is going on beneath the surface without demanding an immediate explanation. Someone who can say, "I can feel that something is happening for you," without turning it into, "You need to open up right now." That difference is everything, because now the avoidant does not feel pushed, they feel noticed. They do not feel controlled, they feel understood. They do not feel like they are being dragged into a conversation they are not ready for. They feel like someone is gently holding space for the truth, even if it takes time to arrive. There is something profoundly emotional about that. To be understood without being controlled is a rare kind of relief for someone who has spent much of life protecting themselves from emotional pressure. It feels like standing in front of a person who sees the fear beneath the distance, but does not try to dominate it. It feels like being with someone who can recognize the tenderness beneath the avoidance, but does not use that tenderness against them.